Okay, guys, we're going to look at a different form of a quadratic function today. Yesterday, we looked at vertex form. We saw that that looked very similar to an absolute value equation, just with an x squared instead of having an absolute value. Today, we're going to look at standard form, which is a little bit different. Yesterday, remember, we started talking about the parent function. The lowest or highest point on a parabola is called the vertex. And then we also have this axis of symmetry, which is this invisible line that comes down through the vertex. And that shows you how your points reflect. Like a point that's on this side reflects exactly to a point that's on this side. That axis of symmetry is the dividing line that it's going to mirror over on either side. Okay. You should have just done an investigation on this. If you haven't done that yet, you need to just stop right now and go do the Google form and answer the questions there before you go on any further. Otherwise, it might not make a whole lot of sense. Standard form for a quadratic function looks like this. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are all just going to be constants. They're integers, some number. They don't necessarily have to be integers, but some number that goes in there that's not going to change. The a value is still the stretch factor, just like it was in the other one. But what you should have noticed on this one is that c tells you where the y-intercept is. B doesn't tell us much specifically about the graph, although we will use B to calculate our vertex, but we don't necessarily see the number B represented anywhere on our graph, so we don't have to worry about that one too much. So here are the steps for graphing in standard form. Just like before, we have to get the vertex, but that is a little bit more work with this one because it's not written out plain and clear like it was in vertex form. So the formula that you're going to use is x is equal to the opposite of b over 2a. What this is actually figuring out, remember that when we use x equals, that is going to be the equation of a vertical line. This formula right here is telling you the equation of your axis of symmetry. Which is important. If I ever asked you to state the vertex and the axis of symmetry, the x by itself would be your axis of symmetry, and then you'd take that number and plug it back in to get y. Substitute in the original equation to get that. Once you get that x and y, that tells you your vertex. So you'll put that on the graph, and then you really have two options from there. One is that you can just plot the c value, which is your y-intercept. Remember, that'll go on the y-axis. The other option, though, you can still use the 1-3-5 rule if you want. You don't have to, but if you're really trying to just remember one method that you're going to be able to use for all of these, that would be the one. And then once you have a point on one side, just like before, we'll reflect it over and connect the dots with a curve. So, let's look at an example. We want to graph y equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. The first thing we have to do is work to figure out our vertex. To be able to do that, we need to make sure we know what all of our values are. So we have to first figure out a, b, and c. In this case, a is equal to 2. It's the number in front of the x squared. B is the number in front of the x, which in this case is negative 8. And c is just the constant at the end, which for this one is 6. A and b are what we're going to need to get the vertex. To do that, we're going to use the formula x equals the opposite of b over 2a. The a and b are the ones that we just figured out. So we're going to plug in x equals the opposite of b. This b right now is a negative 8. So when I plug it in, it's going to turn it to a positive. Divided by 2 times a, which is 2. This is going to be equal to 8 over 4, which means that x is equal to 2. Now again, if I wanted the equation of that axis of symmetry, that dotted line that we keep talking about, it would be x equals 2. That's what we just figured out there. But now that we know that x equals 2, we take that value and plug it back into the original equation. That's how we're going to figure out the y value. It's kind of like what we just finished doing with systems of equations. Once you know one of them, you plug it back in to find the other one. So y is going to be equal to 2 times 2 squared minus 8 times 2 plus 6. Okay, in that first unit when we were practicing substitution, I saw a lot of people make the same mistake over and over and over again. Be very careful. Exponents come before multiplication. Remember, I kept saying there will come a time that if you don't stop doing this, it's going to ruin you, and that time is right now. So you have to make sure you follow the order of operations, which means I have to do 2 to the second power before I can multiply it by the 2 that's on the outside. So this 2 I'm not going to touch. 2 squared, that comes from the white part here, is 4 minus 16 plus 6. 2 times 4 is 8 minus 16 plus 6. When we work that straight across, we get negative 2. And that just told us what y is equal to. Knowing that now, we have our x value, which is 2, our y value, which is negative 2, and what that just told us is that our vertex is at the point 2, negative 2. So now we take that point, 2, negative 2, and we put it on our graph. This is where you have 2 options. We can either do the 1, 3, 5 rule, or you graph the y-intercept, which again is c, and that's going to be y. Now that axis of symmetry that we found the equation to is right here. So we need to take this point that's on 6 and reflect it to the other side of the axis, which would be here. Personally, for me, when the dots are this so far apart, I have a hard time connecting them. So I might still use the 1, 3, 5 rule, but you'll notice that it's a stretch factor of 2, so we'd have to multiply it. So you might do that if you want to check your answer, but you can just kind of estimate here. These 3 points are going to be enough. So that is how we get our graph. Again, we use the formula for the axis of symmetry, which is opposite b over 2a. That's how we figure out what x is. Once we know what x is, we plug it into the original equation to figure out what y is, and then we put those together to get our vertex. We only need to worry about 2 things, the vertex and the y-intercept. That y-intercept we can reflect, and then we have 3 good points to draw our parabola. Let's look at one more. Y equals negative 1/2 x squared plus 4x equals 6. We need to start with our values. A is equal to, go ahead and try to think ahead of me a little bit here and make sure that you're doing what you're doing. A is equal to 1/2. What's B? You should have 4. And what is C? Because it's subtraction, it's going to be negative 6, not positive 6. That's super important. Watch your signs. Okay, we're using the formula again. X equals the opposite of B over 2 times A. The opposite of B is negative 4. Okay, not sure what just happened, but all my writing just disappeared. So we're just going to have to go through this again. Real quick, again, we had A is equal to negative 1/2, B is equal to 4, C is equal to negative 6. And we have to use the formula X is equal to the opposite of B over 2A. So that's where we left off. So we need to do the opposite of B. Since B is positive 4, the opposite of that would be negative 4 over 2 times A. And A is negative 1/2. half. Well, 2 times 1/2 is just going to be 1. It's negative, so we get negative 4 over negative 1, which means x is equal to, oops, just kidding, x is equal to positive 4. Negative divided by a negative. So that would be our axis of symmetry. Now we have to go back and plug this in to get y. So I'm going to do y is equal to negative 1/2 times 4 squared minus, I'm just kidding, 4 plus 4 minus 6. Don't forget, exponents before anything else. So negative 1/2 times 16 plus 16 minus 6. Well, multiplying by 1/2 is just like saying, what is half of 16? And that's 8. So we get negative 8 plus 16 minus 6, which is 2. That means our vertex is going to be 4, 2. So we graph it. 4, 2 is our vertex, which is right here. Now, where's the y-intercept on this one? It is negative 6. And then go back to your vertex and plot your axis of symmetry. On these, it's really important that you do that because you need to remember that it's upside down. So we are 4 away from it on the left. So I'm going to plot a point that's 4 away from it on the right. And I would connect it with a smooth curve that's a little bit wider, like this. That axis of symmetry, you guys, is really, really important because what I see a lot is when people put a point that's below it on the y-axis, they end up reflecting the point like this and drawing a parabola this way, which would be very incorrect. So don't do that. That axis of symmetry is really going to help you remember where everything needs to go. Okay, so that is it for your notes. The main difference here is that you need to figure out the vertex. Once you've done that, you are all good to go. Your assignment's posted on Blackboard.